All right, here we are, 300 plus days after this incident took place. Why make the charging decision that you made today?
Yeah, so UW PD sent in information for us to review, and initially it came in as a proposal for felony charges. After investigation by UW PD, they concluded that we were unable to establish all the elements for the felony charges, so they resubmitted it for misdemeanor charges, which we reviewed, and we made the filing decision on.
And I've read the decline document, but if one of the three of you could explain why there wasn't the evidence to pursue these other charges.
Certainly, if by other charges, the two felony charges that were referred by UW-PD were burglary in the second degree and malicious mischief in the first degree. And as we do lay out in the decline, to prove the elements of the malicious mischief in the first degree, we must prove that a specific defendant caused physical damage to the property of another in an amount exceeding $5,000, that they acted knowingly and maliciously, and that this act occurred in the state of Washington. As to the burglary in the second degree, again, we need to prove as to each individual charged defendant that they entered or remained unlawfully in a building. For burglary in the second degree, that building must be other than a dwelling, that the entering or remaining was with the intent to commit a crime against a person or property therein, and that the act occurred in the state of Washington. And as to both of those charges, we simply did not have the evidence to prove as to each individual defendant that they either entered or remained unlawfully with that intent to commit a crime against a person or property therein, or that they caused the physical damage themselves.
And this was a key piece of this whole investigation, the idea that there were no surveillance cameras inside to show somebody committing a crime.
Yes.
So why just a trespass charge? I mean, what's the commonality with the 33 cases?
Well, based on the evidence we had, we believe we can prove that all these defendants either entered or knowingly remained in the building unlawfully.
And they were arrested on site and taken out of the building.
That's correct.
And I think that the document shows that there was a sign posted saying that the doors close at a certain point.
That's correct.
And so based on that, that's where the trespass crime occurred, or is alleged to have occurred.
Yeah, that's one piece. There's other evidence we believe also supports the trespass.
Can any of you talk about the additional evidence here to suggest that these people were definitely inside that building leading to these charges?
Well, we have body cam footage from a lot of the officers there. We have officers that observed these individuals in the building. They were given opportunities to leave the building and did not do so.
Is there any sort of email evidence, back and forth texts, anything like that to suggest that these people were working together?
I don't believe there is anything at this point that supports that.
Were all of these people students at the University of Washington?
No.
Any way to say how many of them were students at the university? Or are students?
I don't have the exact breakdown.
Okay. I won't press you on that. There's going to be people who say, okay, good, finally somebody's charged for the actions there, even if it is 300 days after the fact, but nobody's being charged with the almost $1 million worth of damage. I mean, how do you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's frustrating for the entire community to have something damaged like that, have a significant dollar amount, and not be able to file charges and hold somebody accountable for that. If we had the evidence to establish that, we absolutely would have filed it. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the evidence, you can't make that filing decision. What we can file is charges against these people for criminal trespass, and that's the charges we ended up filing.
And that's a misdemeanor.
It's a misdemeanor, yes.
I mean, what are the consequences for anybody with a misdemeanor, or is it gross misdemeanor on their record?
It's a gross misdemeanor, and so they're facing up to a year in jail. They're facing a significant fine. This is something that can remain on people's records potentially and have long-lasting impacts for them.
I mean, there's nothing here in terms of a conspiracy to commit, given that they all were inside the building and they're all doing something similar.
To prove a conspiracy charge, we must prove that agreement before the fact and that sort of acting in concert with one another to achieve that stated goal. And unfortunately here, it's my understanding that we simply don't have the evidence to establish that at this time.
So is this the extent of the charges in this case?
At this point, this is the information we have that's been submitted to us by UW PD, and these are the charges that we filed. Now, if additional information comes forward, we still have within the statute of limitations to file additional charges.
And what is that statute of limitations?
For both the malicious mischief first and the burglary second degree, the statute of limitations is 3 years.
So if there was other evidence to come forward about one of these people saying, well, this other guy was the one who smashed the machine, you could potentially do something to it.
In theory, we'd probably need more than just the word of one of the other people in the building. We'd need to establish that through independent evidence. But so far, UW PD has not found anything to establish that, and as well as the independent examiner who was looking at the student conduct wasn't able to find anything like that. So all 3 of our offices have come to the same conclusion that at this point, we don't have enough evidence to file felony charges because we cannot identify with certainty who caused the damage within the building.
One of the other questions that's come up, and we've heard it especially from the Jewish community, is that they believe this is a hate crime, that the people that are students that are on campus doing this kind of thing have made the Jewish students feel nervous and afraid to go to class. So is there any sort of statute here about a potential hate crime because they were in a building where this kind of activity occurred?
I understand that concern. I absolutely do. And we certainly don't want to make any of our community members feel unsafe or hurt in that regard. But no charges were submitted to us for hate crime because I don't think any exist. And so we looked at that as well as UW PD, and we were unable to find any evidence to establish the crime of hate crime.
Even though it was a group protesting over Palestine and writing things about Boeing and urging the university to cut their ties with Boeing. And
right. There's politically protected speech, and then there's hate crime. And this did not cross over onto that line of hate crime. UW PD did not find any evidence of that, and they did not submit a case to us under those charges.
Is there anything you've, from a prosecutor's office perspective, advice that you've given the University of Washington Police Department if, God forbid, another event like this occurs in the political environment?
I think that pursuing all avenues of investigation is appropriate, and we helped UW PD throughout this investigation to suggest other avenues that they might look for. I do think that the lack of cameras within the building ultimately was detrimental to this case, and I think that that's an issue that they are exploring at this point. And that's true not just for UW PD, but other businesses and agencies around our community. If you have good surveillance video, it absolutely helps in the investigation and the prosecution of cases.
So I can already hear in my ear the groups that have been very vocal, the Jewish groups, Jewish alumni groups at the University of Washington, who are going to say, okay, all they're getting them on is criminal trespass, and nobody's being held accountable for any of the violence or any of the destruction inside. That it's not justice. Is this justice?
Well, at this point, we've just filed charges, right? So I can't say how these cases are going to resolve, but I can say that we have looked at all of the evidence that was presented to us, and we made the best filing decision that we had available based on the facts and the evidence in front of us. Ultimately, every person will have their own definition of what is justice, but these are the charges that we can file. These are the charges we believe we can prove, and that's why these are the charges that were filed today.
The two of you have been very quiet through the course of all this. You've had a chance to, I mean, you clearly have done a lot of work on this case. You have documents in front of you. Is there anything else that you wanted to stress that came up in this case that you think is important?
When I hear you say 300 days, what comes to mind is the large amount of evidence that we had to review that was submitted to us by the University of Washington Police Department, and that it matters to get it right. So whether that is emphasizing something that I've already heard you give a little, a bit of a nod to. That is one thing. We take our duties very seriously in this office, and we take the time to make sure that we get it right. And as Dan said, we've made the decision that we can with the evidence that's available to us.
I'll just add, there was a substantial amount of evidence. The felony charges were submitted in June, and then in January, UW PD submitted misdemeanor charges of criminal trespass in the first degree. Our team reviewed those charges and those referrals immediately, and we're filing charges 5 or 6 weeks later. So we definitely try to get those charges filed as soon as possible.
And in between, and I'm so sorry, and in between there was continuing investigation. It's not this has been submitted and we're done. Certainly as the avenues that Dan has sort of referenced, there was ongoing investigation as we were continuing to review what had already been submitted. So I would add to that in the timeline as well.
I also believe that there's a misperception out there that the speed in which we file charges suggests how important that case is to us, when in actuality, the case may be extremely complicated based on the amount of evidence submitted to us, the number of body cams we have to review, the other avenues to pursue in terms of evidential gathering. And so I think it's a misperception that just because a case took a long time for us to file, it means either we don't care about it or it's a lower priority. In fact, in this case, the opposite is true. We had so much work together on this with UW PD because we were taking this case so seriously, and because we wanted to make sure that no stone was unturned and that all of the evidence that could be examined was examined. And that, in part, led to the amount of time it took to file charges. So while I understand the sentiment that, obviously it took so long, this means you don't care about it, in fact, in this case, it took so long because we cared about it so much.
Anything else? I mean, I like to highlight the prosecutors who have been, in the trenches working on this.
Yes,
so that's why
these two.
And of course, Tina Marie Masters. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, there was, how many hours of body worn did you think you reviewed, or Tina Marie?
I don't know. And I was going to say, when you have multiple agencies, you have some overlap, but you cannot just rest by saying, I think that's all the same. You have to watch it all. So three responding agencies. There were 911 calls. There was also the radio traffic, and then you've got reports on top of it.
Yeah, it was a huge undertaking, especially with 33 cases and all the evidence submitted, and all the officers' body warrants. You're having to review all of it. Sometimes it's like watching the same movie over and over again from someone's different perspective, but you have to review it all.